In the last video, we worked with NTP server redundancy, which we will take anytime we can get it. Router 2 is in the middle of an NTP association with both Router 1 and Router 3. We saw in the last video the command to run to see which router it's actually getting its time from. A couple of different ways to do that. We saw that with show NTP association and show NTP association detail. And that all leads up to what I did during the break, which is go to Router 2 and remove the command that's pointing to Router 3 as an NTP server. The Router 3 config is the same as it was, so it's ready to go. The reason I did that is that we're going to try out that prefer option. So let's go ahead and bring up Router 2 here, and you can see I ran show NTP association detail, and we see exactly what we expect to see at this point since I removed 10.11.33 as a potential NTP time server. So .1 is still configured, it's still authenticated, it's our master, sane and valid, just the way we like our associations. So let's go ahead now and try to bring Router 3 back into the mix and prefer it as the NTP time server. And that is NTP server, pardon me, 133. And we still have to put the key in, and we've got to put prefer in. Now, if we put prefer first, you can still put the key here at the end. So it doesn't matter if you put key 1 prefer or prefer key 1. Prefer key 1 looks like you're giving preference to a certain kind of key. So just be aware that however you use this, what you're doing is preferring this particular server as your NTP time source. So let's go ahead and hit it, and we'll run show NTP association. And we see that .33 is already back in the mix, but we also see, without even running show NTP status, we know that it is not synced with .33 because we see a reference clock of all zeros and we see a stratum of 16. So those two values right there are telling you that it hasn't synced up yet. But you know what we're going to do. We're going to run status anyway. Maybe it synced while I was talking. Hey, it looks like it did. Clock is synchronized. Stratum 2 reference is 10.11.33. So it looks like things changed while I was chatting away there. Let's go ahead and run show NTP association again. And you can see that we have that plus sign back, but this time the plus sign is next to 10.1.1.1. And the asterisk and the squiggly, that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for that asterisk. And there it is showing that 10.11.33 is indeed our time source right now. Show NTP status showed it as well. Just a quick reminder that the stratum it refers to here is the local devices stratum. So we're at stratum 2 since we know that both of our NTP time servers are stratum 1 right now. There's your reference. And let's go ahead and run detail. And we know what to look for here. And you could look and say, oh, okay, 10.1.1 is still there. Sure, it's still there and it's configured and it's authenticated, but now it is not our master, it is selected. So it's basically selected as a backup. Sane and valid, that's all good stuff too. But here's 10.1.1.33 and it's our new king. It's our new NTP time server, configured and authenticated, and our master. Now, the reason I bring this up, and I believe I've alluded to it in the previous video, is that most things we do in Cisco land, when we change a value or we want, say, a different HSRP server, we want a different HSRP active router, I should say. Well, we know how to fix that. We know how to change that. And when you change it and you change that priority and you put preempt in there, absolutely it's going to work. And you know that when you want a different root bridge and you change some priorities, you know how to change that, so it absolutely works. And the reason I'm using the word absolutely so often, you know what I'm leading up to, while NTP preferences usually go the way you want them, they don't always work that way. Because what happens is that when I put prefer there, Router 2 is looking for the most accurate clock. That's really what it comes down to, and that's a phrase that you'll see in a lot of Cisco documentation. It's got its own algorithm, and it goes into some of these timers that we are not going to go into at this point in your studies. And frankly, you may never fool with. But the thing is, just because you put prefer in there, and remember the wording with prefer. Let's look at that one more time. Let's look at the command. And prefer, prefer this peer when possible. So you're giving some preference to it. You're saying, I really want to use this particular server, but if the NTP algorithm would come back and said, hey, you know, the time is much more accurate from router 1 or more accurate from router 1 than it is from router 3, then it's going to keep getting its time from router 1. So just a little bit of a real world warning there more than anything else. I doubt that pops up on your exam, but I've popped into that in the real world and in a lab as well. So again, prefer will usually get the job done, but sometimes it's just going to keep preferring another particular server. So we've taken a look at that. Now let's go back to our diagram, and we're going to stick with the lab we have right now. You know, we love redundancy, but here's the easiest question I've asked you all day. What's really wrong with this topology? Where are we asking for trouble? We're asking for trouble because we have 2 NTP servers, which we love. We'd rather have 3, we'd rather have 4. But we have 2, that's great. Router 1 goes down, we can still get time from router 3 and vice versa. But what happens if that fast Ethernet interface on router 2 goes down? Oh, that's not going to be good at all, because that is a single point of failure for us right now. So you know, with that lead up, you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to shut that interface down. So we just had a single point of failure fail. Just happened. So what are we going to see here when I start running show NTP association, etc.? I don't see any changes. Whoop, show NTP. Gotcha. Synchronized Stratum 2, you know, we're still synced up, so nothing's gone wrong yet. And I say yet because you would certainly think something would. Show NTP association detail, everything still looks good there. As a matter of fact, it looks pretty much the same way it did. But let's go back to a simpler command. And we see that win value. And that's going to keep incrementing, because it's like, how long has it been since we heard from these devices? Well, we can't hear from the devices. We shut the interface down. But as with anything with NTP, it's going to take a little while. So I'm going to pause this video and actually try to time that for you as well. We'll see how long it takes, because something bad is going to happen eventually here, and I want you to see it, because there's one little tip-off that you've got an issue with your NTP config. Hang on, and I'll be right back. And we're back, and you can see the win has gone all the way up to 541 and 557 here. I kept hitting the elevator button to see if things had changed, because this is that rare situation where you see 2 different NTP servers, and they're both configured, they both have their squiggly, but there is no master. We know why, because the interface that leads to both of those devices has gone down. But everything else, you know, the reference clock stays the same, the stratum stays the same. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to another detail command, show clock detail. Because if you just run show clock, you get this. And it looks a little different than something we ran earlier. Here's show clock detail, which is also going to tell you what your time source is. Now, I am recording this particular video the day after the previous video, so the date is fine, but notice that dot. And boy, is that easy to overlook. And what that means, especially in this particular instance, as we know, is that we're still getting the time, you know, the original time source is NTP. That's where we got this from. But the thing is, when you see that dot, you know that you're not communicating with your servers. So while the time source is still NTP, that's where we got the time setting from, you have lost those associations with your other servers. Even though they're going to show up, we ran show NTP association, and you see .1 and .33, they're both still there. Let's see what happens if we run a detail with that. And unfortunately, insane and invalid has reared its ugly head again. There it is. And I believe we're going to see the exact same thing with 133. So it looks good at first. You say, oh, configured and authenticated. But again, insane and invalid in the real world or in the networking world, it's never a good thing. So watch out for that little dot, because that means that you have lost your NTP associations. So what I will do right now is go ahead and reopen that. And I'm going to go ahead and pause it. Bring it back, we'll verify it, and then we'll do a little quick work with clock set, And actually, we'll do that now. We will do clock set now, and then I will make sure those associations come back. And this is a command. This allows you to set the time locally. What you're doing is actually setting it on the router. It's a good lab command. The syntax can be a little tricky at times, so let's take a look at this. And first things first, if you go into global config mode and you try to do clock set, it's not going to work because you actually have to be just in enable mode to run this. So if you run clock set, it's going to ask you for a current time, and notice that it's hours, minutes, seconds, and this is military time. So if it's 1 p.m., it's 1300 hours. So if you went with that, that's what you do. And then you're just going to put in your month and your day of the month, and then finally the year. And that's it. That's your clock set command. And I didn't hit enter there because I'm going to go ahead and let the associations reform here. And once that happens, we will be finished with NTP and we're off to the next section. I will go ahead and pause the video. We'll make sure those associations come back and then we'll move on. And just to verify, you see that I've run show NTP association one final time, and everything is back as it was before. 33 is the NTP server from which we're actually getting our time, and .1 is selected as a standby. That wraps up our NTP discussion and our lab work. Let's head for the next section. See you there.